Hello and welcome to the Dementia UK 2021 Summer School and our presentation on supporting families remotely via the Admiral Nurse Helpline. Myself and my colleague Rachel Watson, we are both Admiral nurses on the helpline, supporting families via telephone and emails. Okay, so the aims of the session for today we're going to introduce the Admiral Nurse Helpline, so talk to you about what we do, the people that we support and the way in which we're able to do this. We will also be looking at changes in working practices for everyone due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It has been a difficult time and we've all had to adjust, so we will be having a look at that. We will be looking at the use of communication skills in remote working, which can often be very different than when we're working face to face to people. So picking up on different cues other than those that we would normally use. Rachel will be looking at common challenges that we face via the helpline. So things that can be quite difficult in trying to get in order to support people. And you will also be looking at the ways in which we support callers when they become emotional. So when calls can sometimes be very difficult. So we will talk through that. And then at the end, we will be looking at how we can finish off calls and supporting ourselves and the next steps that we can take. Okay, so initially, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the Admiral Nurse Helpline. The helpline provided by Dementia UK, we have quite over 40 nurses that work on the helpline. Some of the nurses are full-time, some work part-time and some work on a sessional basis. The helpline is open and available for people to call Monday to Friday from 9 AM until 9 PM. And we are also here weekends and bank holidays from 9 till 5. So who calls the helpline? We get a variety of calls from lots of different people. On the main, we support family members and informal carers of people living with dementia. So that can be spouses, children, or any other relatives. We also get lots of calls from formal carers as well. So carers that go in to visit people living with dementia. We receive a variety of contacts from community nurses, from people working in social care, and even GPs sometimes will call. And I think it's also important to say that we also regularly speak to people living with dementia, and we're able to provide them with support via the helpline too. Looking at why people call the helpline, it's a whole range of reasons. We can give practical support, so a way to help people living with dementia when certain problems arise. We can help with advice around financial and legal aspects. We can help with care options when they might need to change for the person living with dementia. We're here, I think, as well. The most important thing I would say is that we're here to listen. So people just sometimes need to call the helpline and say, I need to talk to someone and tell you how I'm feeling. So many of our calls is listening and, you know, letting the person who's calling us feel that they're not on their own and someone's there for them. So that's the main reason why people call the helpline. Okay, so the last 18 months have been particularly difficult for all of us, and I'm sure many people have had to change the way in which they work, and lots of people are working at home. Home working can be easy for many people, but as you can see from the picture on the slide there's also outside influences that can affect us, you know, so learning to work in a very different environment can be challenging. lots of teams are, you know, ourselves included, have increase in telephone work. So, you know, not being able to see people face to face, but talking firstly via telephone, but like today, the use of Zoom has become very, very popular, and we use Teams as well in order that we can have contact with people. I think as well for us on the helpline, we've had quite an increase in calls due to the fact there has been limited access to services out in the community, and those services that are still available in the community have been extremely busy due to increase in demand, as I'm sure you can imagine. So yes, we have lots of increase in calls and lots of increase in telephone work. I think for people who are new to working on the telephone or via Zoom, it's using a new set of skills that maybe we'd not used before. You know, how do we articulate active listening, those kind of things. So they're the changes that COVID has imposed with us, and many other people who are working at home. It's looking at technology as well. I, for one, am not very good with technology, so we've all had to learn. And I think that, you know, we're able to continue to provide a good service via telephone, Zoom, and any other way that we can. So, okay, so I'm just going to have a look at the use of communication skills, particularly at the beginning of a call. And what I would say is, for us on the helpline, when the telephone rings, we have no idea of what that call is going to entail. So it starts off with us making quite a rapid assessment of what's happening when we answer the call. So I think, as we've put here on this slide, it is really important to say, you know, what's in a greeting, and that greeting, the way that we answer the call, will set the scene really for how that call is going to continue. So how do we answer the call? How do we identify ourselves? And for us on the helpline, it's important that people know that when that call is answered, that it's an Admiral nurse that they're talking to. So they've got directly through. We don't have anyone answer the calls for us. So on the helpline, we will always identify who we are by name, and the fact that we are an Admiral nurse in order that that person knows who and what who they're talking to. That, as I say, is important with first impressions, because then the person can feel that they're able to share whatever information that they want to. We've made a note here of what we do about our own support. So, you know, when we're thinking about taking the calls, it's that initial assessment can be tricky. You know, very often I would also say that someone will give us a call and say, I would like some advice on care options, but as the conversation develops, you can often find that it's actually more than that, and there's something else. And, you know, how do we get that? How do we help the person to dig deeper and share what it is they really need to talk about? So letting that person know that we're here to help, and as we've put here, using open questions to show interest and seek that information. And I think the biggest thing I would say is about time. We're very lucky in the fact that we can spend as long as is needed to talk to the person on the call, and sometimes it does take a while for that person to feel relaxed and able to tell us everything that they want to say. So, you know, by showing interest and by responding in the best way that we can. You know, we're on the telephone, we can't always use body language, so it's about the way in which we are able to respond to what someone is saying and acknowledging what they're saying, and allowing them to tell us what's relevant for them, you know, in order to, in a very short time, to build a relationship where that person feels that they are able to open up and tell us what they're worried about, what their concerns are, and work through the issues that are troubling them. So it's about us being able to help them, giving them time, give that person time and space in order to work through possible solutions for the problems that they're experiencing as well. So that beginning of the call is really, really important, in order that then we can go on and really get into what's bothering the person and how it is we can help them. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Rachel now, and she will talk you through further communication skills.
Thank you, Caroline. So Caroline set the scene on how we start a call and the factors and the things to consider in developing that rapport and that relationship, so the caller feels comfortable and able to discuss the issues they're bringing to the call. When we're in the midst of a call, we then need to consider other aspects of communication as well. So although we talk about non-verbal communication perhaps being things that we can see visually, non-verbal communication can also be things such as pauses. And a pause in a conversation or a discussion is quite a natural thing. A pause is often where somebody else might stop just to make their point, or it might be that they're thinking about something that's been said to them and they're taking that information in and digesting it and reflecting on it. So being aware of pauses is quite important. When pauses obviously last a little bit longer, we're then getting into the realms of a pause becoming a silence. And again, silences are very, very useful in telephone work, because they do give our callers again the chance to digest information, the chance to really think about what's happening. Sometimes a silence can signal that a call is nearing its end. It might be a normal part of the call process. But sometimes silences, though, as well, can mean that somebody might be becoming distressed. So we need to be aware of perhaps other non-verbal signs that somebody might be crying. So we might be listening for things like snuffles or sniffs, which might sound a bit strange, but actually they are little signs that we can use on a call to get an idea of how somebody might be feeling. We also think about the vocal inflection in somebody's speech, and inflection is the emphasis of certain words or phrases. So if somebody's trying to tell us something that's really important to them, you might find that there's more pressure put on a particular word, or their voice might become slightly louder when they're saying a particular thing. And to give us that impression that this is really important to them, that they want us to realise that this is something we need to hear, that we need to know in order to understand the situation for them. Alongside that, obviously, there is the verbal communication. So we're thinking all the time as well about the tone of voice of somebody. Does the tone sound low? What are the words that they're using? What are they expressing to us? What is the content of the conversation? What is the speed and the rate of the person's voice? Are they talking very, very fast? This could be a sign that they're perhaps anxious and they're worried about something, and they want to get that information out quickly because it's a struggle for them, or they might have that sense of urgency because they need to get back to the person they're caring for. Often our callers don't have much time and they want to get the most out of the call that they can. So you might find that the callers talk very, very fast to try and get through the issues that they want to talk about, and identifying that and validating that for them is really important. And then it means that we can move at their pace as well during the call, because we know they've only got that limited amount of time. And that's similarly, you know, with the flow as well, you know, being aware that if somebody is moving the call on more swiftly, what is that about? Is it because they've got other pressures on them? You know, is it that they're waiting for a call from the GP, or, you know, what's happening that's making that call, you know, happen more swiftly at that time. During the call as well, we obviously need to show that we're interested to the caller. We need to show that we are listening, that we understand what they're bringing to us. We need to validate their experiences and the conversation that they're having with us. Our callers bring their interpretation of a situation, their understanding of a situation with the person they're caring for, and we need to affirm that, and we need to show that we understand where they're coming from, that this is very much their experience, and how they experience a situation will be very different from somebody else. We're all individuals, you know, and we all deal with situations in different ways, and that's no different for the families that we support on the helpline. We'll also need to offer empathy. We need to show that understanding, you know, that we can put ourselves in the other person's shoes. We can understand that this can be tough. And within that, we will be using open and closed questions to elicit as much information as we can to give the best support that we can to the caller. Open questions, of course, you know, allow more discussion. They allow somebody to reflect on a situation and really think about what it's like for them. Closed questions can do the opposite, but sometimes they can actually be really useful. If, for example, a caller is quite upset, using a closed question can give us an indication of what's happening. You know, when somebody might be struggling to speak, you know, then, you know, we can still show some validation. You know, we can show empathy through closed questions sometimes as well. And I guess there is a skill in knowing when each type of question can be used. It is very much about, you know, the feedback we get from the caller and understanding where they are at that point in time. And I mentioned before there about responding to pauses and silences, and we often, I think, as human beings, can feel a little bit wary of silences, or we can feel a bit uncomfortable. But actually, a silence can be a really therapeutic thing in a phone call, because it does allow somebody that time and space, you know, to reflect on what's happening and to think about what they want to tell us next, or what they, you know, what response they want to give to something we've said. So, you know, trying to bear with that silence and giving it a little bit longer perhaps than you would normally, it can actually be a really useful tool during a telephone call. It's also really vital to make sure we've got the right end of the stick, that we really do understand, you know, clearly what somebody is telling us, you know. So it's important to clarify, to ask questions, to make sure we've got the gist, that we you know, we do get what they're telling us, that it is, you know, we've got it right. We're not making assumptions. We do understand, you know, what the situation is for that person and what they need from us on that call. Summarising is another tool where we can do that as well. We can ask clarifying questions, but we can also summarise what we believe we've been told, you know, and check out, is this right? You know, let me just, can I just check? You've said da 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 da. Is that what you meant? Is that right? And I think above all else, often we need to think about what our instincts are telling us as well. You know, if we've got an instinct that something doesn't seem right, you know, something's not quite as it seems, check it out. You know, because instincts, we all develop instincts over time doing what we do, and we might not always be able to quantify where that instincts come from, but it can give us some really good tips, and it can give us some really good you know, prods in a certain direction of, you know, to check something else out. Some of the common call challenges that we experience on the helpline it's sometimes maintaining focus, keeping the conversation on track. Sometimes conversations can become quite circular. Families can be struggling with situations and sometimes feel as though there isn't a way forward, and those conversations can sometimes feel a bit as though that they are going round in a circle. So one of the elements of what we do is to try and help the caller move that conversation along, towards looking for outcomes, looking towards solutions, but definitely solutions that are right for that person. We're not about necessarily telling somebody this is what you need to do. It's about giving families the chance to reflect on their situation and find the right way forward for themselves. We need to be very clear about boundaries as well, about what we are able to do on the helpline, what we can't do on the helpline, and that needs to be very, very specific, because sometimes families, if they are very desperate, will ask for things from us that we're not able to provide, unfortunately. But what we can do is signpost, to local services that hopefully can, do that for them. Supporting with emotional and distress calls can, of course, be difficult. It's important to know what your own support mechanisms are, who else might be, around that you can contact. If you're working remotely, this is, of course, more challenging. But knowing, who your point of contact are, where are your colleagues, are they available? And particularly if you know that a call you're going to make, there is a high chance that it is going to be a challenging call in some way, perhaps having that, a debrief set up for after the call, so that that you can, just talk through how the call went and what happened and how it felt for you, as an individual as well, because we do have to care for ourselves when we're doing this kind of work, because it can be very demanding emotionally. So we need to make sure we've got the right support in the wings, as it were. We also, very occasionally on the helpline, not often, but sometimes we do take inappropriate calls, calls that aren't for the helpline, probably not for any helpline, very, very rarely, but we also obviously need to be aware as to how to handle those, politely and sensitively, but firmly sometimes. And we do sometimes, take calls from family members who are very, very angry, and often the anger it's not about us, it's not about Admiral Nursing, it's not about the helpline. People can be very angry because of the situation they're in, and very frustrated by other services, or other situations, or other family members sometimes. So so again, respecting that that's how the person feels, and giving them the chance to vent those feelings and reflect on the feelings, but keeping that within boundaries of what is acceptable during the call. So then we come to sort of ending calls, and with some calls, it feels as though they reach a natural conclusion. There might be a long pause at the end of a discussion, and it can feel as though it's kind of naturally concluded. And again, it's important to check that out. You want to make sure that does feel the same for the caller. But what we tend to do on the helpline is to sort of bring the call to a close, is really to recap what we've spoken about. So we'll summarise the call, we'll summarise, the issues that we've discussed, we'll summarise the actions or the plans that we might have developed with the caller, so it's very clear about what the next steps are, and what they plan to do, to take things forward. We always provide the caller with feedback as well, about the call, about how they're dealing with situations, because families often feel very isolated, and they feel that they sometimes feel they're not doing a good job, when actually they are. They're providing excellent care in really, really challenging circumstances. So I think it's always useful to feed that back, and just to validate the good work they're doing for their relative, the good support and care they're offering. Talked about clarifying actions, you know, what are our actions? Sometimes we do send email information, for example, or we might send out leaflets in the post. So being clear about what we are doing and, you know, what they're doing. And also offering further contact. You know, it's good to let callers know they can always come back to us on the helpline at any time. You know, they're not limited to 1 call or 2 calls. Callers can come back however often they feel they need to, and we'll always, you know, take the call, and we'll also always offer, you know, any help or support that we can. And also locally, you know, where can they access that help locally? If it's something they need in their own area, where do they need to go for that? You know, and we will always look for that as far as we can and provide them with that information. And I think it's also really good to accept gratitude. And I don't know that we're always very good at doing that. But I think, you know, callers, when they've had a good experience and they feel as though they've really got what they needed, will be grateful. And I think it is, you know, really important to accept that gratitude and accept the compliment when it's given. You know, and because that's nice for us. It's nice for us as well to feel that we're doing a good job, because we all want to do the best we can in the work we do. And that brings us to the end of our presentation today. So thank you for listening. And does anybody have any questions?